I always believed in my grandpa's stories, even when no one else did. Those tales of covert operations and wartime heroism seemed so real when he told them, his weathered hands gesturing excitedly, his eyes distant with memories. But at Jefferson Middle School, believing in my grandfather made me a target. "Hey Gibson, tell us another one about your grandpa the secret spy," Jake Mercer called out in the cafeteria, loud enough for everyone to hear. His friends erupted in laughter. Was he buddies with Captain America too? I stabbed my fork into the mystery meat on my tray, trying to ignore them. Grandpa Walter had moved in with us after Grandma passed. His limp was bad, and sometimes he got confused about what day it was. But the stories, they never changed. They were always detailed, specific, not the kind of thing someone makes up. "I heard he claims he advised the president," Brianna chimed in. "My dad says he's just some old man who probably cleaned latrines in basic training." That one stung. I grabbed my backpack and left my lunch half-eaten. Walking home that afternoon, I kicked at loose gravel along Oak Street, wondering why Grandpa's stories seemed so important to me. Maybe because believing him was like having a superhero in the family when everything else in our lives felt so ordinary. Our town, Millfield, was the definition of middle America obscurity. A dot on the map with one high school, 3 churches, and a main street that rolled up the sidewalks at 8 p.m. My dad worked at the factory outside town. Mom taught 3rd grade, and we lived in a modest 2-story that needed a fresh coat of paint. Nothing special, except for Grandpa Walter. "How was school today, kiddo?" he asked when I walked in, sitting in his usual spot by the window, an open book on his lap. I dropped my backpack. "Same as always." He studied my face. For an old man, not much got past him. "Those kids still giving you trouble about me?" "It doesn't matter," I mumbled, heading to the kitchen for a snack. "You know," he said, following me slowly with his cane tapping against the hardwood, "there was a time when what other people thought mattered to me too. Learned this lesson earlier than I did. The truth doesn't need everyone to believe it to remain the truth." I nodded, not really in the mood for one of his philosophical moments. "Patriots' Day celebration tomorrow. You coming?" His eyes lit up. "Wouldn't miss it." Those events always take me back. Little did I know that taking him back would have such a literal meaning. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Perfect weather for an outdoor assembly. American flags decorated the football field, where folding chairs had been arranged facing a small stage. Principal Thornton, with his perpetual bow ties and droning voice, was halfway through his speech about American values when I heard it. A distant thumping sound, growing louder. Heads turned skyward. 3 dark shapes appeared on the horizon, the unmistakable silhouettes of military helicopters. The principal's words faltered as the Blackhawks approached, their rotors slicing through the morning air with rhythmic precision. "Is this part of the program?" someone asked. It wasn't. I could tell by the confusion on the teachers' faces. That's when I noticed Grandpa Walter. He wasn't surprised. Instead, he slowly rose from his seat, standing ramrod straight despite his bad leg, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The helicopters circled once and began their descent onto our football field. The wind whipped across the football field as the Blackhawks descended, their massive rotors creating miniature dust storms that had everyone shielding their eyes. Principal Thornton's mouth was moving, but his words were completely drowned out by the thunderous roar. Teachers frantically tried to organize students, herding them back from the impromptu landing zone. And there stood Grandpa Walter, completely unfazed. "Grandpa," I called over the noise, but he either didn't hear me or chose to ignore me. His eyes were fixed on the lead helicopter, his weathered face illuminated with something I'd never seen before. Validation. Jake Mercer was suddenly beside me. "What the actual hell, Gibson? Did your grandpa call in an airstrike on our Patriots' Day?" For once, there was no mockery in his voice, just awed disbelief. The lead helicopter touched down first, its side door sliding open before the skids had fully settled. Two men in sharp military dress uniforms emerged, followed by an older gentleman with silver hair and more medals on his chest than I could count. Even from a distance, his authority was undeniable. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," came a voice over a megaphone. "This is not a drill or an emergency. We apologize for the interruption." Principal Thornton looked like he might pass out as the silver-haired officer approached him, spoke briefly, then took the microphone. The other choppers remained hovering, their presence commanding the skies above our small-town ceremony. "Good morning, Millfield," the officer's voice boomed across the field. "I'm General James Harrington of the United States Army Special Operations Command, and I'm here on official business." The crowd murmured in confusion. Mrs. Delaney, my history teacher, was frantically taking pictures with her phone. "Sometimes," the general continued, "our nation's heroes walk among us unrecognized. Sometimes, due to the classified nature of their service, they carry their achievements in silence for decades." My heart started racing as the general's eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto my grandfather. "Walter Gibson," he called out. "It's been a long time, old friend." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes shifting between the general and my grandfather. Grandpa straightened his posture even more, if that was possible, and began walking toward the stage. His limp seemed less pronounced, as though the presence of his past had temporarily healed him. I watched in stunned silence as my classmates and teachers, the same people who had dismissed his stories as the ramblings of a senile old man, now stared open-mouthed. Before I continue with this long overdue recognition, General Harrington said, "I want to quickly acknowledge that moments like these are rare. If you're enjoying this unexpected turn of events, make sure you're subscribed to keep following remarkable real-life stories like Walter's. Sometimes truth is more extraordinary than fiction, and you won't want to miss what's coming next." Now, let's return to this historic moment. As Grandpa reached the stage, the general stepped down to meet him. They embraced like brothers who had faced death together. When they separated, both men had tears in their eyes. "For those wondering why I've arrived with such fanfare," the general addressed the crowd, "I'm here to correct a 50-year oversight. In 1971, Master Sergeant Walter Gibson led an operation so classified that not even the families of those involved were permitted to know. Today, by presidential order, we can finally tell part of that story." "How come?" My mom appeared beside me, clutching my arm. "Did you know about this?" she whispered. I shook my head, unable to speak. Mom looked as shocked as I felt. If she didn't know, that meant Dad was in the dark too. Grandpa's secrets ran deeper than even his family realized. The general handed Grandpa the microphone. My heart pounded as he cleared his throat and looked out at the crowd. His eyes found mine, and he gave me the slightest nod, an acknowledgement that would forever remain between us. "I never served for recognition," Grandpa began, his voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "But there are men, good men, whose names deserve to be remembered." As he started speaking about events from half a century ago, I noticed something alarming. 3 men in dark suits had appeared at the edge of the field, watching the proceedings with intense focus. They weren't military. Their stance was different, more casual, but somehow more dangerous. One of them was speaking into his wrist, his eyes never leaving my grandfather. What exactly had Grandpa done during the war? And why, after all this time, were people still watching him? The crowd fell silent as Grandpa Walter's voice carried across the football field. I'd never seen my classmates so attentive, not even during Principal Thornton's most serious announcements about prom cancellations. Every eye was fixed on my grandfather, this suddenly mysterious figure who'd been hiding in plain sight all these years. Operation Kingfisher, Grandpa began, was never meant to exist in any official record. We were ghosts patrolling the DMZ, listening where American ears weren't supposed to be. As he spoke, I couldn't help but notice how the men in dark suits had begun to inch closer. One of them touched his earpiece, nodding slightly to the others. "There were 7 of us," Grandpa continued, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. 3 never made it home. Their families were told they died in training accidents on US soil. It was easier that way, cleaner. But those men, Thompson, Ramirez, and Miller, died heroes on foreign soil. I glanced at my mother, whose face had gone pale. The grandfather she thought she knew was revealing himself as a complete stranger. "Sir," one of the military officers whispered something to General Harrington, who nodded and placed a gentle hand on Grandpa's shoulder. "Walter, perhaps we should save the details for the ceremony in Washington next month," the general suggested, but Grandpa shook his head. "These people, my family, deserve to know something of the truth, James. They've lived with a half-person long enough." The wind picked up again, and I shivered despite the warmth of the May morning. The men in suits were definitely moving in now, positioning themselves around the perimeter of the stage. If YouTube has taught you anything lately, it's that accounts get unsubscribed mysteriously all the time. Take a second to check if you're still subscribed and drop a like if you're as shocked as I was learning my grandpa's secret life. Trust me, what comes next is even more unbelievable. Grandpa's voice dropped lower, forcing everyone to lean in. What I'm about to share was declassified this morning by executive order. In December 1971, my unit intercepted intelligence about a planned attack that would have violated the Paris peace talks. We were given clearance to prevent it by any means necessary. The tension in the air was electric. Even Jake Mercer, who'd spent the last 2 years mocking my delusional grandfather, stood transfixed. "Walter," General Harrington warned softly. "It's all right, James," Grandpa replied. "I'm not going to compromise national security at a high school Patriots Day." That got a small laugh from the crowd, breaking the tension momentarily. One of the suited men was now only yards away, speaking urgently into his wrist mic. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "The intelligence we gathered that night saved thousands of American lives," Grandpa continued. "But it came at a cost that went beyond the men we lost. Some of us came home to families who could never know what we'd done, or why we'd changed." He looked directly at my mother then. "I'm sorry, Susan. I couldn't tell you why I stopped being the father you remembered. Some ghosts follow you home." Mom's grip tightened on my arm as tears streamed down her face. That's when I noticed movement near the tree line. More suits, at least 4 of them, were approaching from different directions. Whatever Grandpa had been involved in 50 years ago still commanded serious attention. General Harrington gracefully took back the microphone. "Master Sergeant Gibson's unit prevented an international incident that could have extended the war by years. Their actions directly saved an estimated 15,000 American lives." The general reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "By order of the President of the United States, I present you with the Distinguished Service Cross, 50 years overdue." As the medal was pinned to Grandpa's chest, the crowd erupted in applause. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The suited men were now forming a loose perimeter around the entire ceremony, and one was speaking frantically into his communication device while staring at the sky. I followed his gaze upward and saw it. A small black dot growing larger by the second. Another helicopter? No. This was different. Smaller, sleeker, and moving much faster. The general saw it too. His expression changed instantly from ceremonial to tactical as he spoke rapidly to his aides. Whatever was coming, it wasn't part of the official program. Grandpa's eyes met mine across the field, and in them I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Fear. The approaching aircraft cut through the sky like a predator. growing larger by the second. My first instinct was to run to Grandpa, but the suited men were already moving with practiced efficiency, forming a protective circle around him and the general. "Everybody down!" shouted one of the military officers, his voice carrying across the field. Principal Thornton began herding students toward the school building, but panic was spreading. Parents grabbed their children, teachers tried maintaining order, and in the chaos, I somehow found myself moving against the crowd, toward the stage. "Grandpa!" I called out. The sleek black helicopter was now clearly visible, unmarked, with tinted windows that revealed nothing of who was inside. It hovered directly above the field, rotors whipping the air into a frenzy. "Hey, if you're enjoying this wild turn of events, make sure you're still subscribed. The algorithm sometimes drops subscribers without warning. Hit that like button if you want to see what happens next, because trust me, nobody saw this coming." General Harrington had his arm around Grandpa now, guiding him toward one of the Black Hawks. The suits had formed a human corridor, hands inside their jackets, ready for whatever threat this mystery aircraft posed. "That's a Sikorsky S-76, I heard Jake say beside me. "Private sector, not military." I didn't even realize he was still next to me. "How do you know that?" "My dad's obsessed with aircraft. Whoever's in that thing has serious money." The unmarked helicopter descended to about 50 feet above the ground, then a rope ladder unfurled from its side door. A figure appeared in the doorway, an elderly Asian man in an immaculate suit, his white hair blowing wildly in the rotor wash. "Jang," I heard Grandpa say, though I shouldn't have been able to hear him from this distance. The general's face had gone pale. "Walter, we need to go. Now." But my grandfather stood his ground, shaking off the general's grip. He stared up at the elderly man, who was now descending the rope ladder with surprising agility for someone his age. "That's impossible," one of the suited men said. "He's supposed to be dead." Grandpa turned to me, his eyes finding mine across the chaos. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. The Asian man touched down on the field, and the crowd fell silent. He straightened his tie and walked directly toward my grandfather. "Hello, old friend," he called out in slightly accented English. "It seems we have unfinished business from Operation Kingfisher." The general stepped forward. "This is a secure military operation. You need to—" "I have not come to speak with you, General," the man interrupted. "I have come to speak with the man who spared my life 50 years ago." The air seemed to vibrate with tension. Mom had found her way to my side, clutching my arm so tightly it hurt. "What's happening?" she whispered. I shook my head, speechless. The man called Jang had reached Grandpa now, and they stood face to face, two old warriors from opposite sides of a long-forgotten battlefield. "They told me you were dead," Grandpa said. "As they told you," Jang replied with a thin smile. "Governments find it convenient when certain men disappear." The suited men had their hands on concealed weapons, but Jang seemed unconcerned. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, causing everyone to tense, but withdrew only a small, weathered photograph. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, holding it out to Grandpa. As my grandfather took it with trembling hands, I saw his face crumple with emotion. "I kept my promise," Jang said quietly. The photo shook in Grandpa's hands as he stared at it, then back at the man. All these years. Their private exchange was interrupted by the general. "Walter, this man is a known." "Known what?" I couldn't stop myself from calling out, breaking through the perimeter of suits to reach my grandfather's side. "What exactly is going on here?" Grandpa looked at me, then at the photograph in his hands. Finally, he turned to the crowd of stunned students and parents. "This is a photo of Jang's wife and daughter," he said, his voice strong despite his age. "I found it on him when our units clashed in Vietnam. I was supposed to eliminate him, but I couldn't. He was just like me." A soldier following orders, with a family waiting at home. Zhang nodded solemnly. Your grandfather defied orders to save my life. Then he promised to find my family if I didn't make it home. I searched for years, Grandpa continued. But after the war, I was told Zhang had died anyway. The general stepped forward. Walter was declared MIA after that mission. We believed Zhang's people had captured him. And I was told the Americans executed me, Zhang added with a bitter smile. Politics. The tension dissolved as these two former enemies embraced. No longer soldiers from opposing sides, just two old men who'd survived the same nightmare. That's why I never spoke about the war, Grandpa said to me. I thought I'd failed, both my mission and my promise. But you kept the photo all these years, I realized. Some promises you never break, even when hope is gone. That Veterans Day, the real lesson wasn't about medals or helicopters. It was about humanity persisting even in war's darkest corners. About promises kept across decades and enemy lines. 2 weeks later, Grandpa and Zhang, now fast friends, visited our class together. Even Trent listened in awe to their story of honor that transcended sides. Sometimes the most heroic act isn't what you do in battle, but who you choose to be when no one's watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more tales of ordinary heroes making extraordinary choices. Some stories deserve to be remembered, just like my grandfather.